Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of Avatar: The Last Airbender Commander deck techs. The Avatar set has a huge number of legendary creatures, so I wanted to showcase some of my favorite commander options from among them. I'm releasing a new Avatar Commander deck every Thursday through mid-January when the Lorwyn set drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for a specific Avatar Commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you want to see me build it, let me know in the comments below. As you see, our commander today is Avatar Aang, shown here in his final battle with Phoenix King Ozai. In one of the coolest battles in the history of Western animation, at least in my opinion, we get to see Aang not only reach the greatest heights in his mastery of bending, but also solve the problem of defeating Ozai without taking his life. This is a triumphant moment, one that ends Aang's journey and a century-long war at the same time, and it's truly satisfying to watch. Thanks to @DrSuperlative for requesting this video. I'm excited to show you what I put together for Aang, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander, most especially in a deck like this. I want to show off why the card is cool and why I put it at the head of my deck, so whatever it asks of me, I put 30 cards toward doing. That's our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward these three categories of support in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I always hit my land drops and I can cast my spells. So let's talk about our commander. Avatar Aang is a 4/4 legendary human avatar ally, obviously an avatar, for one of every color except black, a red, a green, a white, and a blue. He has flying. He has Firebending 2, which means when he attacks, we add 2 red mana to our pool, and it doesn't empty from our pool until the end of combat. Or until combat's over, I should say. And whenever we Waterbend, Earthbend, Firebend, or Airbend, we draw a card. And then if we've done all 4 this turn, we transform Avatar Aang into Aang, Master of Elements. He is a 6/6 flying avatar ally with spells we cast cost Wooburg less to cast, which does reduce generic costs. And at the beginning of each upkeep, we may transform Aang back to his front side. If we do, we gain 4 life, draw 4 cards, put 4 1/1 counters on him, making him an 8/8 flyer, and he deals 4 damage to each opponent. Crazy. Just amazing. So Avatar Aang does a lot for us. He's a 4/4 flyer for 4, which is already great. He rewards us with a card every time we bend, the same way he learned lessons every time he'd practice his own bending. If we manage to hit all 4 kinds of bending in the same turn, the 4th one will flip him into a 6/6 flyer that discounts all of our spells by 5, an effect that might as well be omniscience. And if we want, we can cash out his transformation at the start of any upkeep, claiming further rewards in the process, and getting our commander back on the escalator. This is an incredibly powerful card, and while it asks a lot of us, it also does so much in the process. But if you had to guess, which of his abilities would you call the strongest? A 5 mana discount to all of our spells is pretty hard to beat, but exploding into 4 kinds of value when he changes back is nothing to sneeze at either. Plus, he's a big flyer in the command zone that makes mana every time he swings in. There are several answers to the question of which ability is strongest. Which one do you think it is? That's right, it's drawing cards. No, really, Aang's transformation is completely aspirational. Sure, it's not impossible to pull off, but it's hard, requiring at least a few other cards in narrow categories to make it happen. That's why Aang puts another card in our hand every time we take a step toward his transformation, so that his backside's discount doesn't go to waste if we've emptied our hand to flip him. But much as I said in my Toph the First Metalbender video when I talked about Earthbending, the kickback we're given for doing something hard or risky is, in this case, actually better than the thing itself. That's not to say that Aang's backside isn't worth building toward. Perish the thought. It wouldn't be much fun to play a commander whose built-in quest has such a huge payoff if we didn't try for it. But the process of getting there gives us so much value on top of the prize we receive at the journey's end. So how do we take the most advantage of that? Our deck has 10 cards that let us airbend, 10 that waterbend, 10 that earthbend. We even have 1 that firebends, but we mostly rely on our commander for that. Each time we perform our bending feats, we get to draw another card, hoping to set ourselves up for our inevitable ascension. When we finally pull it off, we flip our commander over and cast whatever spells we have remaining in our hand for nothing, or next to nothing, shotgunning value onto our playmat. But Aang's battle with Ozai wasn't a one and done, so neither is our game plan. We're running a dozen wheel effects, cards that let us refill our hand to get the party started again. Many of them force our opponents to wheel as well, but unlike us, they're probably not ready for a new hand in that moment, and losing the cards they've been planning to cast feels worse for them than getting a fresh 7 feels good. It's disorienting, just like it was for the Fire Lord when his 12-year-old opponent began chasing him. Our plan is to flip our commander, cast as many spells as we can, and then wheel into a new hand so we can keep it going. If that wheel draws us a second wheel, so much the better. Aang's apotheosis is a spectacle, so we play through this turn fast, intimidating the rest of the table as we up our storm count and pile permanents onto our playmat. And since many of our wheels shuffle our graveyard back into our library, it also means that we may end up playing our smaller spells again, even in the same turn, Aang showing off the techniques he's learned in the process of mastering the elements. What does all this get us? A huge board, a flurry of ramp and removal spells, a powerful commander who we can slightly depower in exchange for refilling our hand again and giving us back our draw engine. But it doesn't stop there. We have payoffs for all of this card advantage, making us tokens and pumping up our creatures and even doing direct damage to our opponents. We have protective spells to keep Aang and his friends safe amid our storm. We even have a sub-theme of counters that gives us even more value when we Earthbend or embiggen our allies. And just to make it clear that this is about Aang's journey, we have at least one card featuring each of Aang's friends, as well as all 4 Bender Ascension cards, which is how I fit Zuko in. Our deck plays like an orchestral score in the final battle, familiar motifs slipping into the main theme as we crescendo toward the climax. That said, within our commander, none of this feels like a struggle. For him, that time is past. He's crossed his legs and found his center and tasted his onion and banana juice. He's gone from earth to water to fire to air, from sound to light to thought, and his connection to the pure cosmic energy of the universe is blocked by nothing. He bridges the material world and the spiritual world, and he sees through the illusions of separation and attachment and death to the truth that underlies all things. He is the Avatar, and his chakras are open. You'll enjoy this deck if you like having a goal to build toward as your game plan comes together, or if you like the feeling of one card flowing into the next, and the next, like energy-changing forms, with you calm at the center of it all, even if your opponents are anything but. So as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section, a bunch of cards that I considered putting into the deck and ultimately chose not to, but it's a great place for you to start if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you want to go in a different direction than I did, or if your focus wants to shift when you build your own Avatar Aang deck. So we're going to get started with not all the bendings. We're going to start with our wheels. These are the 12 cards in the deck that let us draw a new hand, whether it's a fresh 7 or otherwise. A little bit of a weird one is what's going to start us off, but I do love this card from Throne of Eldraine. This is Midnight Clock. For 2 and a blue, we get an artifact that taps for blue. Our deck is mostly blue, so this is a pretty nice little bonus here. We can pay 2 and a blue to put an hour counter on it if we want. Hour counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're used by this card. At the beginning of our upkeep, at the beginning of each upkeep, we put an hour counter on the clock. That's each upkeep, including our opponents. And when the 12th hour counter is put on this artifact, we shuffle our hand and graveyard into our library, then draw 7 cards, and we exile the clock. So it's only a mana rock for us for a little while, but we can control it a bit by putting extra hour counters on it, and maybe on another person's turn, we're going to be able to do our wheel effect. Maybe we can even blast through it, faster on our turn. We get up to the 11th counter, and then we're ready to swing in with Aang. We get him to flip. We pay 3 mana that we've got left over, maybe even during combat, using the Firebending mana that he gave us, and we flip into Midnight Clock's striking midnight. We get a new hand, and we get to keep going. Seems fun. Next, this one's really silly. This is Molten Psyche from Scars of Mirrodin. For 1 and double red, we have a sorcery that says each player shuffles the cards from their hand into their library, then draws that many cards. So this is one of the few cards I tried to put a big focus on our wheels, always giving us 7 cards if possible, rather than just like the new Final Fantasy Commander card Snort, which gives us 5 cards. I tried to go for either 7 cards or for wheels like this that give us the same number of cards that we lose. So if we already had 7, which maybe we did from wheeling into this, we get another one. Molten Psyche also has Metalcraft, however, which is if we control 3 or more artifacts when we cast it, it will deal damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that that player has drawn this turn. So not quite the same as all the value we're getting from us drawing cards, but a lot of our wheels affect our opponents as well. They're symmetrical. So we can certainly do a lot of damage to our opponents even with just this. Pretty neat. Next is Spirit Water Revival. This is a wheel from the Avatar set. For 1 and double blue, we get a sorcery that says draw 2 cards, and then exile it. That's just divination. However, as an additional cost to cast it, we may waterbend 6, meaning we can pay 6 generic mana and we can tap artifacts and creatures to help with it. It's sort of like we're paying this cost and we can improvise and also convoke at the same time. That's how waterbending works. So we would draw 2 cards, but if we paid that additional cost of waterbending 6, instead we shuffle our graveyard into our library, draw 7 cards, and for the rest of the game we have no maximum hand size. This is unlike most wheels because it doesn't also shuffle our hand into our graveyard and library. It just shuffles the graveyard back and then draws us 7 cards. So we get to keep whatever cards we also had in our hand. So pretty nice. Next is Windfall. It's a classic. 2 and a blue for sorcery. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards that a player discarded this way. So if somebody has 7 cards, because maybe we made the whole table wheel, and now every opponent has 7 cards, and we've cast a few cards, so we're down to like 3 or so, and one of those is Windfall, well, we will discard the 2 remaining cards in our hand, and then draw a fresh 7, because one of our opponents is also having to discard their 7 that they just got. That's fun. Next is Decaying Time Loop from the Doctor Who decks. 3 and a red for an instant. It's an instant speed of wrath. Most of them are not. Discard all the cards in your hand and then draw that many cards. Pretty okay. So a red wheel, it's an instant speed one, but it also has Retrace. This is one of the cards in the deck that in my testing I found a lot of wheeling often ends us up with several lands in our hand, and if we've already made our land drop for the turn, that is just sort of dead cards for us. We don't have anything to do with those. And we have a few cards in this deck that address that. One of them is Decaying Time Loop. It has Retrace. We can cast Decaying Time Loop again from our graveyard if we're willing to discard a land in addition to paying its other costs. So if we've wheeled using Decaying Time Loop into a new hand, we cast our spells out of it, and if we have any lands in it, we just discard that as part of paying for this, and we get to discard all the cards we have in our hand and draw that many again. And we can do this on a later turn as well, assuming Decaying Time Loop is still in our graveyard and we haven't wheeled it away with something else. So very nice for us. I should mention, I guess now, the way that Avatar Aang's backside works for these spells. If we were going to cast Decaying Time Loop, its cost is reduced by Wooburg, which means it's reduced by 5 mana, 1 of each color. So the red is reduced, and each of these 3 are reduced as well. So this would be just free for us. The same is true of Midnight Clock. It reduces by blue and 2, and then 2 more, but we don't need to do the 2 more, so it's just free. Molten Psyche is 1 and double red. So it will reduce that generic cost, and it will reduce one of these red pips, but it won't reduce the other one. So we're going to have to pay a red in order to cast Molten Psyche with Avatar Aang in play. However, that's us paying only a red, not 1 and double red, because he's discounting the generic mana and the single red. Similarly, Spirit Water Revival is going to cost us a single blue and Waterbend 6, because Waterbend 6 is an additional cost, not part of the mana cost. So we're going to have to spend a single blue and then Waterbend 6 in order to get it to be wheel mode. Does that make sense? Just like Whispering Madness, we're going to have to spend nothing, because it does reduce by a blue and by a black and by 3 other mana. There's only 2 that are required here, so yeah. But like Step Between Worlds, it's going to reduce it to a single blue, because it does reduce by a total of 5, 1 of each color, so it'll reduce 1 of these blues away and all of the generic cost, and so it's just a single blue. You get it. So Whispering Madness is next. 2 and a blue and a black for a sorcery. This is one of the only 2 black spells in our deck. It's a sorcery that says each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. It is Windfall. However, it has Cipher, which means after this effect, it resolves by us exiling it encoded on a creature we control. Encoded is a weird old mechanic. It essentially is like it's in exile, but it's also sort of attached to a creature. It's not literally attached by the rules, but people mostly represent it by tucking it under a creature, the way you would with like a Banishing Light or an Oblivion Ring. And then you sort of treat it like an aura on that creature, even though it isn't on the battlefield, it's in exile. Because Cipher says when you encode this card onto a creature, whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, we can cast Whispering Madness for free as this triggered ability. So yeah, if we put this on Avatar Aang, which is what we would probably do, next time we hit with Avatar Aang, we're going to be able to cast Whispering Madness just for free as soon as we do that combat damage. So pretty sweet. But if Avatar Aang happens to leave the battlefield, Whispering Madness will just stay in exile forever, and that's fine. Plenty of our wheels exile themselves once they resolve. Speaking of which, it's Step Between Worlds. 3 and double blue for a sorcery that says each player may shuffle their hand and graveyard into their library, and each player who does draws 7 cards. Then we exile Step Between Worlds. So just a classic wheel effect. 5 mana in blue to let everyone wheel, and then it exiles itself. However, we can also plot it for 4 and double blue. Plot is an Outlaws of Thunder Junction mechanic that says if we pay this plot cost, we can exile Step Between Worlds, and on a later turn, we can cast it as a sorcery, because it is a sorcery, without paying its mana cost. Of course, plot is also only as a sorcery. So this is maybe nice. If we've got some mana lying around, we can use this to, we use it to plot Step Between Worlds, and we just have a wheel for us sort of in our back pocket that we can cast for free whenever we want. But typically, we're going to be using this the same way we would our other wheels, casting it for just a single blue when Aang's backside is up. Either way, good flexibility. Time Reversal is everything that we just saw without the plot and without the optional nature of it. For 3 and double blue, we get a sorcery that says each player shuffles, not each player may shuffle, their hand and graveyard into their library, then draw 7 cards, exile Time Reversal. This is sort of our touchstone for the way these things work. Echo of Eons is better. That's why it costs a little bit more. And this printing is even cheaper. It's just, this card is just so good in our deck. I had to throw it in, even though it's a little bit close to our price limit per card. For 4 and double blue, we get a sorcery that says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draw 7 cards. It's the exact same as Time Reversal, except it also has flashback for 2 and a blue. So we can do this for 6, or rather with Avatar Aang out, a single blue, and then we can flash it back for 2 and a blue, or with Avatar Aang out for free. Because flashback is an alternate cost, and Aang is not... Aang's ability doesn't give our spells an additional alternate cost, which would mean we'd only get to pick one. He gives us a cost reduction for our casting of our spells, and flashback is an alternate method of casting. So we can reduce it with our commander. Pretty sweet. Game plan is next. It's very much the same thing as before, but with one little wrinkle. 5 and a blue for a sorcery that says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draw 7 cards, exile game plan, but it has assist, meaning any other player, or one other player rather, can contribute up to 5 generic mana to this cost, so we don't have to pay as much. Maybe someone will be willing to do that. It's worth asking. It's probably not going to happen, but you can never tell. Emergency Powers is next. This is our most expensive wheel. 5 and a white and a blue for an instant that says each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library, then draws 7 cards, and we exile Emergency Powers. So we can do this at instant speed, which could be pretty nice for us. It means we can Firebend with Avatar Aang when he attacks. If that's our 4th bending type, we can flip Avatar Aang, and then we can use his Firebending mana to cast Emergency Powers for free, since it requires us to spend 7 mana, and Avatar Aang only reduces by Wooburg, which means he'll reduce by a white and a blue and 3 generic, and it costs 2 remaining, which we can then use his Firebend 2 red mana to pay for. Otherwise, we wait until the second main, when he's flipped over to his backside, Aang Master of Elements, and we just pay 2 mana to cast this. Although it is worth mentioning that is only 2 generic mana, since this colored mana has already been reduced. So yeah, little fun things to do with this as an instant. However, maybe we don't want to cast it during combat, because it has addendum. It's still an instant, but if we cast it during our main phase, we can also put a permanent card with mana value 7 or less from our hand onto the battlefield, meaning we will do our wheel and then get to just put something directly into play. That's pretty sweet. So yeah, Emergency Powers is an old favorite card of mine. I think it's good in this deck because it's flexible in a couple of different ways, and it could just power something out if we need it to. And it's worth mentioning that it says mana value 7 or less, which kind of makes you want to put the biggest thing you can into play, but if you're really looking for it or you really need this, you sure could just put a land into play, and if it would come in untapped, like a basic land, it comes in untapped. Yeah. Finally, we have Commit to Memory. Commit to Memory is an Aftermath card, which means in our hand, or if we're casting it from exile or something like that, we can only really cast Commit. Memory has Aftermath, which means it can only be cast from our graveyard, and then it's exiled. So the idea behind this is we commit, it goes to the graveyard, which from there we can cast Memory, but if we get into the graveyard in another way, like discarding our hand, and it's in our hand, we can do it like that. So what does it do? Commit is an instant for 3 and a blue that says put target spell or non-land permanent onto its owner's library second from the top. So this is a removal spell. It bounces something to the top of someone I guess not bounces, it tucks it. It puts it on top of its owner's library. And because it can hit spells, it can also target things on the stack. Or we can just hit their commander, or an enchantment, or an artifact that's problematic, just anything other than a land Commit can hit. So that's pretty nice. And once it's in the graveyard, we can cast Memory, which is each player shuffles their hand in graveyard into their library and draws 7 cards. So a great wheel effect. It does cost us a single blue when it's discounted by Avatar Aang, but that's a single blue for us to do 10 mana worth of stuff if we're doing Commit with Aang and then Memory with him as well. I just always think about the time that I did this to, I'm sorry, not on top of the library, second from the top, silly me. But I did this to a friend of mine with their commander, and she said, sure, I'll just put it in my library. I'll just draw it, next turn after I cast a draw spell. And then I cast Memory, and she couldn't say anything like she didn't expect it because it's on literally the same piece of cardboard. And she had to shuffle her commander away because once it's already entered a new zone, she couldn't have redirected it to her command zone since it's already there. She could have when I committed it, but after I'd committed it, it was already in there in the library, and Memory just changed its position in that zone. So yeah, just a fun moment and a good way to play Commit to Memory. So that covers our wheels. Let's start talking about how we're doing all this bending. Starting with our Airbending cards. And I will say this, it is hard to put these cards together in this deck because so many of the Avatar cards, at least right now, are so expensive. Especially the ones that get you experience counters from the Avatar Jumpstart product. So not all of these are the very best Airbending cards we could run, or really not all of any of our bending cards are the absolute best, but many of them are very good. And the ones that aren't that good, it's a great place for you to upgrade if you happen to have those cards or you're willing to spend the money to do so. I'll just go ahead and mention Aang the Last Airbender right here is 3 and a white for a 3/2 legendary human avatar ally with flying. And when Aang enters, we airbend up to one other target non-land permanent. So for 4 mana, we get to airbend something and it leaves behind a 3/2 flying body. And whenever we cast a lesson spell, Aang gains lifelink until end of turn. We have a total of 5 lessons in our deck. So he's not likely to have lifelink, but you never know, he might. And a 3/2 flyer for 4 is fine, especially when it comes with an airbend. But this is, again, not the absolute best version of Aang, and not the absolute best version of an avatar, or rather of an airbending spell. So there's definitely room to upgrade in this deck, but with the price constraints that I put on myself, this is still not bad. It's just there's upgrades to be made. For example, Airbender Ascension is much better. For 1 and a white, we get an enchantment that says when this enchantment enters, airbend up to 1 target creature. Just get to get rid of something of our opponents, or get to put something of ours in exile and then to recast it for 2 generic mana, which, of course, if the backside of our commander is up, means we can recast it for free. Whenever a creature we control enters, we put a quest counter on Airbender Ascension, and at the beginning of our end step, if there are 4 or more quest counters on Airbender Ascension, we exile up to 1 target creature we control and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So we get to flicker something. That's pretty sweet. We have several different ways to take advantage of that, or even if it's just attacking with one of our creatures that isn't our commander, and then now it's tapped, and then we go to the end step, and now it's not tapped anymore because we flickered it. But it will enter, and it will put another quest counter on this if that is to matter for us. Eventually, we're just going to be putting a lot of quest counters on this after it's already met its threshold of quest counters, but that's just how it goes. So this comes in, and for 2 mana, at sorcery speed, we get to airbend something, and eventually we get something good out of it. Airbender's Reversal is next. It's also 1 and a white. This is one of our lessons. It's an instant. We can either destroy target attacking creature, or we can airbend a creature that we control. So, not a removal spell with the airbend side, but it is with the first mode. So, good for us both ways. Aang Swift Savior, which if you haven't checked it out, I have a video on my channel that is Aang Swift Savior as a bracket 1 deck. Is just sort of, let's talk about book 1 water with Aang at the head of it, and then a upgrade from that in the same video. I'll link that video in the description. So Aang Swift Savior is 1 white and a blue for a 2/3 legendary human avatar ally with flash and flying, so we can flash him in. And when he when he enters, we can airbend up to 1 other target creature or spell. So this is a little bit like Commit. We flash him in, and if there's a spell we don't like on the stack, we can airbend it. Otherwise, we can just airbend a creature. It can be one of ours or someone else's. And Aang says Waterbend 8, and we can transform Aang. Aang becomes Aang and La, Ocean's Fury, a 5/5 legendary Avatar Spirit ally with reach and trample, and when it attacks, we put a 1/1 counter on each tapped creature we control. So tapped meaning, hopefully, that we attacked with it as well, but it could be that we just waterbent it to pay for Aang's transformation. So being able to do that gives us the ability to put counters on those creatures as well. Pretty nice. Airbending Lesson. This is Aang with Monkiatsu. 2 and a white for an instant lesson that says airbend target non-land permanent. So this is solid removal, really, but also it's a good way to rebuy our own things. And it comes with us with just a card advantage, or not advantage really, it replaces itself. We draw a card. Next is Glider Staff. This is 2 and a white for an equipment that equips for 2 and gives the equipped creature +1/+1 and flying, pretty nice. And when it enters, we airbend up to 1 target creature. So we get to just send something into the air and then give one of our creatures flying, or put it on our commander who already has flying, but could certainly use that +1/+1. Might as well. A lot of the ways that we win in this deck come from taking advantage of our pump and counters effects, which could come in the form of attacking with a big board, but often we win with commander damage with our flying commander. So there you go. We've seen Aang the Last Airbender. Let's talk about Avatar's Wrath. And I do want to make mention of this. Avatar's Wrath, since I use my pricing from Mana Pool, it's listing at $20 right now. That's crazy. Card Kingdom has it for $7. Cool Stuff Inc. has it for $5. I think this is just a short supply right now, so check back, and I'm sure that there will be more Avatar's Wraths in supply in Mana Pool, which is the store that I recommend. And if not, there are other better cards for you to run that aren't $20. I'm not saying this is a bad card, it's a great card. But if you're looking for a 10th Airbend card, and it's not worth spending $20 on it in a deck that because of that is only $110. This is far and away the most expensive card in the deck, but it's very good and very thematic. so I kept it in for now. I would just wait until this price goes down, or just proxy it. Anyway, Avatar's Wrath is 2 and double white for a sorcery that says choose up to one target creature, then airbend all other creatures. So every creature on the battlefield goes to exile and can be recast by its owner for 2 generic mana, except for one, which is going to be our commander Aang. Except that until our next turn, opponents can't cast spells from anywhere other than their hands. So all of their creatures that weren't tokens, because the tokens are just gone forever, all of their creatures are in exile, and they can recast them for 2 generic mana, but not until our next turn. And of course we exile Avatar's Wrath at the end. Pretty powerful. The Legend of Yangchen is next. This is the avatar, this is the last Airbender, or Air Nomad avatar that we had before Aang. Right before Aang was Avatar Roku, and before him was Avatar Kyoshi, before her was Avatar Kuruk, and before him, Yangchen. Avatar Yangchen, or rather the Legend of Yangchen, is a saga. If you haven't seen a saga before, the way this works is it comes in and it gets a lore counter on it, and then it gets a new lore counter at the start of each pre-combat main phase you have. Whenever it gets a lore counter, you look at the abilities it has, and it will trigger that ability based on the number of counters it has. So when it first comes in, it gets a counter and it triggers ability 1. During your first main phase of your next turn, you'll get a second lore counter, and it'll trigger ability 2, and then the following turn, it'll get 3, and this one exiles itself and returns to the battlefield transformed, but if it didn't, once that final saga trigger goes off the stack, normally a saga is sacrificed. This one, you don't have to worry about that since it transforms. Anyway, the first ability, the first chapter, is, starting with you, each player chooses up to 1 permanent with mana value 3 or greater from among permanents your opponents control. Exile those permanents. So the idea is we choose a permanent that's mana value 3 on someone else's playmat. And then everyone else does the same thing. People can choose the same one. Maybe everyone at the table will choose that same one that we chose, but they can't choose anything on our playmat because it can only be a permanent that our opponent controls. So we're going to be exiling at least one thing, maybe someone's commander, maybe multiple people's commanders or permanents. It doesn't have to be creatures. It can be anything that is mana value 3 or greater that we don't control. Then chapter 2 is we may have target opponent draw 3 cards, and if we do, we draw 3 cards. Great, we're here to help. And then chapter 3, we exile this and return to the battlefield transformed as Avatar Yangchen. Incredible art. I love this art. Avatar Yangchen is a 4/5 flying avatar that says whenever you cast your second spell each turn, airbend up to one other target non-land permanent. So we can't airbend Yangchen herself, but we are able to airbend things on our playmat, on other people's playmats, anything on the board that isn't a land or Yangchen herself. So this does require us to cast 2 spells, but that's not hard to do, especially with as many spells as we have that are castable and with the amount of ramp we are running. And of course, it's not hard to do once we're on the back, we have the backside of Aang up. But it does require a little bit more of us in order to get this airbend, if that's what we're trying to do in order to have airbend so that we can flip our commander. However, it does let us draw a card when we do that airbending. So pretty nice as a way to replace our second spell multiple times. Like a repeatable airbending is very nice here. We don't have many cards that let us do it repeatably. But we do have Appa. Appa is a 4/4 flying legendary bison ally. This is Appa Loyal Sky Bison, who is inexpensive as compared to the like $16 Appa from the end of the series. He's 4 and double white for a 4/4 flyer that when he enters or attacks, we can either give one of our creatures flying until end of turn or airbend another target non-land permanent that we control. It has to be something we control, but we do get to airbend it, and that's okay. As long as we airbend it, that counts toward bending for our commander, so we're going to draw a card, and it's going to put us one step closer to flipping Aang over into Master of Elements. Finally, we have a blue card that airbends. It's Whirlwind Technique. 4 and double blue. For an instant, it's one of our lessons, that says target player draws 2 cards, then discards a card, and then we airbend up to 2 target creatures. They don't have to be ones we control. So this is pretty expensive for an airbending effect, but at least it gives us a card and a little selection in the process. So yeah, what's especially nice about this is with Whirlwind Technique, if we are casting this when we already have flipped Aang to his backside, we're getting to do all this for a single blue. We're drawing 2 cards, we're discarding something, which might be a land, it might be a card that we can flash back or otherwise cast from the graveyard, like Commit to Memory, and we're getting 2 things out of the way of the rest of our creatures, or rebuying 2 of our things. And I should also mention, I don't have, in this deck, as opposed to some of the other decks that I have made with Airbend cards in it, I don't have this card listed as a protective card, because we're not really using Airbending defensively that much in this deck, but you sure can do that, because this airbends at instant speed. So if you want to protect one of your creatures from being exiled or from being destroyed, something like that, you can just airbend it and just recast it. Not ideal for doing with our commander, because it will have him come back as his front side without getting the benefit of, sort of cracking him from his backside to his front side as he's able to do in the upkeep. And it will remove all counters from him, but it's better to do that than have to recast him from the command zone and have to pay the commander tax. So there we go. That covers our airbending cards. Let's talk about our waterbending cards. Waterbending. Oh, silly me. There we go. So, we're starting off with another fun off-color card. It's a Ruthless Waterbender for 1 and a black. A 1/3 human soldier ally that has 1 ability, Waterbend 2. This creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, activate only during your turn. So, it's not a superlative ability, but it is repeatable waterbending for very inexpensive. And we can tap the waterbender, the Ruthless Waterbender, to pay for it. So we only have to pay 1 mana or tap another artifact or tap another creature. And we've gotten our waterbending done for the turn, which means we draw a card if our commander's in play. Also worth remembering that we have that airbending staff that we saw a minute ago. That's an equipment. So we can tap that for waterbending because it doesn't have any kind of other use for tapping. It just has all of its abilities, whether it's tapped or not. So we can tap it as part of a waterbending cost. And that adds one more thing toward it, that we weren't using that card's ability to be tapped for anything else. Waterbender Ascension is next. 1 and a blue for an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, put a quest counter on this enchantment, and then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, we draw a card. So we get up to 4 quest counters, and all of our creatures have Curiosity. This is just Coastal Piracy or Reconnaissance Mission. It's very nice, but only 2 mana. We just have to work up to it. And we can also Waterbend 4, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. Think about tapping your Airbender staff as one of the parts of Waterbending to make one of your creatures unblockable, to make our commander unblockable. That might just be enough commander damage to kill an opponent. Very nice. We've seen Aang Swift Savior. He's able to Waterbend and flip over into Aang and Law Ocean's Fury. Pretty nice. It's expensive waterbending, but maybe we have plenty of creatures and artifacts in play to make it happen. Next up is Evasion Submersible. 2 and a blue for a 0/0 artifact vehicle. It doesn't even have crew on it. So this comes in and it's just an artifact, which of course means we can use it to waterbend things. However, when it enters, we return up to 1 other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So we can bounce one of our things, or more likely, remove one of our opponent's things. Maybe something they spent a lot of mana on, so we just spend 3 and put it back in their hand. We also have an exhaust ability, which means we can only ever activate it once, and that's it. That ability is Waterbend 3. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature, put 3 1/1 counters on it. So this puts counters on itself. That's pretty good. It becomes a 3/3 only once, because we can't activate an exhaust ability more than once, but it does give us the ability to, for 3 mana, bounce something, and then we've got a waterbend effect just sitting on the battlefield for us anytime we need to use it, which will give us a free creature. It will put counters on something, which I mentioned we have a sub-theme for, and if our commander's in play, it will draw us a card. Plus, of course, this is an artifact, so we can always tap it for waterbending for other things, whether or not it's a creature. Next is Katara Bending Prodigy. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 legendary human warrior ally that says at the beginning of your end step, if Katara is tapped, put a 1/1 counter on her. So why would Katara be tapped unless we're attacking with her? Well, because we've used her to waterbend. And she even comes with a waterbending ability for 6, which seems like a lot. Draw a card. But there's a lot of cards in our deck that we can use to waterbend, including Katara. So if we use Katara to pay for herself, we're drawing a card. We're drawing a second card from our commander because we waterbent. And at the end of step, since Katara is tapped, she gets a counter on her. Pretty sweet. A much more powerful version of Ruthless Waterbender tapping itself for its own ability. However, this Ruthless Waterbender's ability is much cheaper, so if we need cards from that, or we need to be able to do waterbending so that we can flip over Aang, Ruthless Waterbender often is the way we're going to go with it. But Katara is very powerful too. Next we have North Pole Patrol. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human soldier ally that we can tap to untap another target permanent we control. That means maybe we attack with Aang in the air, when he's got a bunch of counters on him, or he's flipped to his backside, and now he's tapped, and our opponent decides to swing in, we can just untap Aang and block with him. Or we could untap one of our lands that makes 2 mana. If we have any of those, then this is us ramping with North Pole Patrol. Even if not a land that makes 2 mana, it could just be a land that makes 1 mana, just a basic land. And this is us tapping North Pole Patrol to untap a land and then tap that land again, and that gives us even more mana, so very nice. We can also waterbend 3 and tap it to tap target creature an opponent controls, which gives us a little bit of evasion, a way to get past our opponent's blockers because the blocker we were most worried about is now tapped down. All of these nice repeatable waterbending effects, I like that very much. We've already seen Spirit Water Revival. It lets us wheel if we waterbend in addition to the 1 in double blue. So that's pretty great, but it is not a repeatable effect, so worth remembering that. Similarly, we have another one of our lessons. This is a sorcery called Waterbending Lesson for 3 and a blue. We draw 3 cards, and then we discard a card unless we waterbend 2. We don't have to waterbend 2 there. We just draw 3 and discard 1. That's still pretty fine for us, especially if we're doing this for free with the backside of our commander up. But if we want to waterbend, we could do this before we flip our commander in order to help flip him. And now what we're doing is we're drawing 3 cards for 4 and waterbending 2 to draw an extra card. So it becomes a total of drawing 4 cards for a total of 6, but 2 of that is waterbendable. That's not bad. Katara Water Tribe's Hope is next. 2, a white, and double blue. So with Aang's backside up, we can cast Katara, but it's going to cost us a single blue, since he will discount it by the generic 2, a white, and a blue, and we've got a blue left over. So she is a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally with vigilance, that when she enters, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token. That's nice. And then she has Waterbend X. Creatures we control have base power and toughness XX until end of turn. X can't be 0. Activate only during your turn. So Katara gives us a way to take all of our mana, pump it into her, and we can waterbend as well, tapping our artifacts and maybe even our creatures, and every creature we didn't tap is now huge, and we can swing in with it because it's changed their base power and toughness. We're probably not going to be waterbending for more than 6 here, which means the backside of our commander is probably better just to be a 6/6 rather than us waterbending, because it doesn't say creatures have base power and toughness XX or their own printed base power and toughness. If that is higher, it changes it no matter what. But it's a possibility. We can have quite a lot of mana that we can pump into this, and maybe we make our creatures really huge. We can't use it to block, since we can only do it during our turn, but we can use it offensively, and that turns this little 1/1 ally into something pretty big. I'm going to take this moment to talk about Waterbend X. There are several cards that have Waterbend X on them that do not have this phrase, X can't be 0. There's a card, for example, called Crashing Wave that has Waterbend X on it. It doesn't say X can't be 0, which means we can choose 0 for those other cards, and we have still waterbent with those cards. Meaning we will still trigger Aang, it counts as waterbending, and we do draw a card off of it. We can't do that with Katara, specifically because she says so, but with those other cards we can, and so if you want to put one of those cards in this deck, I have chosen not to, but if you wanted to, that's a good option for you. Finally, we have Giant Koi, I know this seems like a strange choice for waterbending, but it just helps us out so much. This is a 5/7 fish for 4 and double blue, with Waterbend 3, and it can't be blocked this turn, or Island Cycling for 2, meaning while it's in our hand, we can pay 2 and discard it to search our library for any island, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. Which is sweet. We can find any of our typed duels. We can find any of our basic islands, of course. Most of our deck is blue. And now the fish is in our graveyard, and if we happen to wheel and shuffle our graveyard back into our library, we'll probably find it again at some point. So Giant Koi as a way to do repeatable waterbending is why I have it in this deck. Obviously with Avatar Aang, we're going to have to pay a blue to cast it, since it'll discount this 4 and a blue, leaving 1 blue behind. But then it's a 5/7 body that we can make unblockable, and that's pretty good. Also, I do want to make mention, in case you're a new player and you're not sure about this ability, this creature can't be blocked this turn. That is something you can activate on other players' turns, or even post-combat on your turn. The fact that it can't be blocked doesn't mean it has to be able to attack as well. We can do this on an opponent's end step if we want to. That creature couldn't have been blocked because it couldn't have attacked, but we can still activate this ability and it just gains the status that it can't be blocked. That's still totally fine. It's not cheating or bending the rules or anything. That's just how the rules work. You pay the cost, you get the effect, even if the effect is something that can't be used. But if we're paying this cost, remember, that means we've waterbent, and that will trigger Aang. Draw us a card. So that covers our waterbending section. Let's talk now about earthbending. We're starting off with, I think, a really fun one that we're very unlikely to earthbend with. Earth and Ally is a single green for an 0/2 Human Soldier ally that gets +1/+0 for each color among allies you control. Meaning, if our commander's in play, he's already getting +4/+0, because Aang is 4 colors, he's everything but black. But it's also true that he is an ally as well. It doesn't say among other allies you control. So he's actually a 1/2 because he's in play. So it's just funny to me. He's a 1/2, but it's just not printed that way because his bonus is coming from himself. And then we can pay 2 and Wooburg, so 7 mana, to Earthbend 5. If you've never seen Earthbending before, it means one of your lands becomes a 0/0 creature with haste, that is still a land, and we put 5 1/1 counters on it, and when that land dies or goes to exile, we put it back onto the battlefield tapped. It won't be a creature anymore, it won't have any counters on it anymore, of course. It's just a land. But it becomes an animated land, essentially, that we can still tap for mana if we want, or we can attack or block with it. And that's 7 mana to repeatedly Earthbend 5. This is an activated ability, so it is not discounted by our commander's backside's cost reduction ability, because that only changes or only reduces the cost of spells, not abilities. We would have to actually activate this for 7 mana, which seems crazy to me, but it is possible. And this is just a nice creature that we can get out cheaply, and sometimes this is going to go off. It's pretty fun when it does. Next up is Haru Hidden Talent. 1 and a green for a 1/1 legendary human peasant ally that says whenever another ally we control enters, Earthbend 1. So we get to make one of our lands into a 1/1. So Haru's out, we play the Earthen ally. Haru lets us Earthbend 1. We are running a total of 13 allies in our deck, including our commander. So being able to continually Earthbend is pretty great. We put this on multiple lands of ours, so we can have those as nice blockers, knowing that we're going to be able to get them back if they die. Just sort of, we treat these Earthbent lands as though they were tokens, but it's also true that you can Earthbend a land that's already been Earthbent. For example, Haru might see an ally come in and Earthbend one of our forests. Then he sees another ally come in, and we can Earthbend that same forest. It's already a 0/0, so it doesn't matter that it becomes a 0/0 again, but we put a counter on it both times, so now it's a 2/2. So pretty nice. And if it was targeted by the Earthen Allies Earthbending ability, now it's a 5/5 plus 2, it's a 7/7, that's great. Next up is Earthbender Ascension, 2 and a green for an enchantment that says when it enters, we Earthbend 2. And then we search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So we need to Earthbend 2 on one of the lands we already have, and then we go find a basic and put it on the battlefield tapped, which is Rampant Growth. So This is rampant growth for an extra mana that Earthbends 2. That's pretty good. However, also, it has a landfall ability. Whenever a land we control enters, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. You've seen these ascensions before. When we do, if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, we put a 1/1 counter on target creature we control, and that creature gains trample until end of turn. Pretty good. So we've got multiple things going on with this. We're getting to Earthbend for 3. We're getting to get an extra land, and that land will enter and trigger this landfall ability, putting a counter on Earthbender Ascension. And as long as we've gotten that to happen 3 other times, the third of those additional times, it's going to start putting counters on things and giving those things trample until end of turn. Those might be lands themselves, lands that we've Earthbent, or it might just be our creatures. Pretty good. And I'm wondering, is Earthbender Ascension tagged properly? It is. It's got evasion. Good. So next up is Rockalanche. This is another one of our lessons. It's a sorcery for 2 and a green that says Earthbend X, where X is the number of forests you control. That may be, I don't think it's likely to be, but it may be 0 when we when we cast this. We have a lot of forests in our deck, plenty of them. Not that many basics of any type, really, other than necessarily islands, but plenty of dual type lands, and many of them are forests. So this is going to let us make probably like a 3/3. That'll be all right. And then we can also flash it back for 5 and a green. Not terrible, but it lets us Earthbend for 3 mana, and that's what we want. Next is Earth Kingdom General. This card is great. 3 and a green for a 2/2 human soldier ally that it enters and it Earthbends 2. So it's 4 mana, and we get 2 2/2s out of it. That's a pretty good rate. In addition, whenever we put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a creature, we may gain that much life. Do this only once each turn. So it doesn't have to be the first time we do it each turn. We can choose when the first time during a turn that we put counters on something happens, we can choose not to gain life. Then the second time happens, we can choose to gain the life. We just don't get to do it any further times after that. It doesn't have to be the first time, it's just only once per turn. But we have lots of ways to put counters on creatures, whether it's from Earthbending or from Earthbender Ascension having its landfall trigger when we have enough quest counters on it to put counters on things. Maybe we Earth an ally to Earthbend 5, which means we would gain 5 life, and other ways to do counters as well. And Earth Kingdom General gives us a little life every time we do, just once per turn. Next is Earth Rumble. 3 and a green for a sorcery that lets us Earthbend 2, and when we do, up to 1 target creature we control fights target creature an opponent controls. Yeah, that's it. It's just a removal spell and gives us a 2/2 from one of our lands. If we are able to use that land to kill off an X2 on an opponent's board, we'll get our land back because it was Earthbent. It'll just come back into play tapped. So Earth Rumble is very nice for us as a way of Earthbending. It may be the last bending type we need to do during that turn, which means we'll get to do the Earthbending, and then this is a reflexive trigger because it starts with when. So the Earthbend is going to happen. It will trigger this trigger, but also Avatar Aang. So we could flip him over, assuming this is, again, like I said, the last type of bending we need to do in that turn. And now we've got a 6/6 Avatar Aang, or Aang Master of Elements, and we could have him as a 6/6 fight something. You could sequence it that way if you wanted to. Next up is Sandbender Storm. It's our off-color card for the bending set. 3 and a white for an instant that says choose to either destroy target creature power 4 or greater, or Earthbend 3. Oftentimes we're going to use this as an expensive way to Earthbend 3, but that's fine. Sometimes we use it as a removal spell, and that's fine too. Like I mentioned, there's plenty of ways to get cards back into our library and to draw them again, so we don't have to be shy about using cards like this for the effect that we don't think it's in the deck for. Destroying our opponent's creatures can win us the game too. Next we have Solid Ground. Solid Ground is 3 and a green for an enchantment that says when it enters we Earthbend 3. Pretty good. And if 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on it instead. So this is the hardened scales effect, meaning Solid Ground enters and this ability triggers. When it resolves, this is in play, so we will Earthbend 3 and we will put 4 counters on that land because we're putting 3 counters on it, but if you would put any counters on something, you put that many +1, so it's a total of 4. And if we have the Earth Kingdom General in play when we do that, it will see 4 counters put on something, and we can choose to gain 4 life. So Solid Ground is nice as a bonus for all the different ways we have to put counters on things beyond just Earthbending. Next we have the Boulder, ready to rumble. 3 and a green for a 4/4 legendary human warrior performer. Very nice. Whenever the Boulder attacks, we Earthbend X, where X is the number of creatures we control with power 4 or greater. So whenever the Boulder attacks, we're Earthbending at least 1, because the Boulder himself has power 4, which means the Boulder attacks, we Earthbend. Earthbending makes us draw a card from Aang. And if Aang's attacking at the same time, we're also Firebending. So we're going to get a draw from both of those. As we should, if we have already Airbent and Waterbent earlier in the turn, then we attack with Aang and the Boulder, we get both of their triggers, we get to draw off of both of them, and the second of the 2 that resolves, since we get to put them both on the stack at the same time in whatever order we want, since we control both triggers, is going to flip Aang into his backside. So the Boulder is a great way for us to get a little bit of repeatable Earthbending when we attack with him, and therefore draw us more cards and, just be more fun. Look at this smile. Finally, we have our Toph. It's Toph, Hard-Headed Teacher. 2, a red and a green for a 3/4 legendary human warrior ally, and when Toph enters, we may discard a card. If we do, we return target instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand. We've got a bunch of those, many of which are lessons, and this is another way for us to get lands out of our hand when we're wheeling that we don't need filling up our hand. Just a good way to use them. Then, whenever we cast a spell, any spell, just cast a spell, that's all we gotta do, we Earthbend 1. So great repeatable Earthbending. If we're casting like a Waterbending spell early in our turn before combat, we're gonna get to Earthbend as well, so we're halfway toward getting Aang to flip. And if that spell is a lesson, we put an extra 1/1 counter on the land that we Earthbend. So it'll become Earthbend 2, essentially, is sort of how it seems. But if we also have Solid Ground out, it's an additional 1/1 counter on top of that, and so it's sort of like Earthbend 3. Get to put 3 counters on it. So very nice, repeatable Earthbending from several different sources. Toph, the Boulder, Earthbender Ascension doesn't do it repeatably, but Haru does. Most of the rest of them are sort of one-offs, and that's fine. And that covers our Earthbending. Now, I mentioned we have 1 Firebending card. It is the Final Ascension. Most of our Firebending we are worried we're going to be able to get just from our commander, since he's guaranteed to Firebend if we attack with him. So we don't need a whole 10-card section to shore that up. But we do have Firebender Ascension, which says, for 1 and a red, we have an enchantment that when it enters, we make a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. So whenever that soldier attacks, we will Firebend as well, and we'll get to draw a card off of Aang. And whenever a creature we control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, we put a quest counter on this enchantment. And then if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, we can copy that ability and choose new targets for the copy. So this means if we attack with the Boulder, we're going to put a quest counter on Firebender Ascension, because the Boulder says whenever it attacks, we Earthbend X, where X is the number of creatures that we have attacking that have power 4 or greater. We're going to get to do that twice, even if the Boulder's the only thing attacking, because he's got power 4. We're going to put 2 counters on Firebender Ascension, and then the next turn, we're going to attack. Oh no, I'm sorry, it won't trigger twice unless we have the 4 counters on it. But once we have the 4 counters, it will trigger twice, which is important because when we Firebend, whether it's from this soldier or from our commander, once we have 4 counters on Firebender Ascension, that attack that's put the 4th counter or any subsequent counter on Firebender Ascension, the trigger gets doubled. That ability, or rather the triggered ability gets doubled. Which means for Aang, and of course for this little soldier, with Aang in play and Firebender Ascension having at least 3 counters on it, a Firebending trigger will put a 4th counter on this and be copied, and Aang's Firebending trigger, or Aang's ability, sees Firebending as a way to draw a card. So we'll draw an extra card. So Firebender Ascension doubles our card draw with Aang once it's gotten up to these 4 Yeah, once it's gotten up to these 4 quest counters. Because Aang has a triggered ability that is triggered based on a creature we control attacking. I may be wrong about this now that I'm thinking about it. Whenever a creature you control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger... No, I'm right. Because Aang attacks, he triggers Firebending. The Firebending is the thing that's triggering, and is triggering from his attack. So we're going to get to make a copy of that Firebending ability. Whenever you Firebend, Aang draws you a card. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I got there. I talked myself out of it and then talked myself back into it. So yeah, Firebender Ascension is really a secret card draw spell, if you want to look at it that way, with our commander in play. So that covers all of the cards in our game plan. We're going to talk about all the cards that supplement our game plan, but first, we're going to go through these sections of support for it. Starting with card advantage, which, as usual, I have tagged as draw. It doesn't mean necessarily that all these cards draw us cards, just that this is a way for us to get more cards into our hand. Or cards, not necessarily into our hand, but get more cards, get access to more cards that we can then cast. There we go. So Wizard class is the first one. If you haven't seen a class before, the way it works is you pay its casting cost, and it's an enchantment that gives you the first ability, which for this one is, you have no maximum hand size. At sorcery speed, while it is level 1, which it comes in as, you can pay 2 and a blue to level it up to level 2. When we do, it triggers this ability. When it becomes level 2, we draw 2 cards. And then once it's level 2, at sorcery speed, we can pay the cost of level 3 to level it up to level 3, which gives us the ability, whenever we draw a card, we put a 1/1 counter on target creature we control. Once it is in play, it's always going to have its level 1 ability. It only gets this trigger once we level it up to level 2. That's a one-time thing. But once we get level 3, it gets this ability as well, but we always have no maximum hand size. So what we want to do is get it up here so that we can put counters on our creatures, particularly our commander, whenever we draw all of our cards that we're getting from wheeling or from bending, thanks to Aang. Ominous Seas is next. For 1 and a blue, we get an enchantment that says whenever you draw a card, put a foreshadow counter on this enchantment. Again, foreshadow counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this next ability, which says remove 8 foreshadow counters from this enchantment to make an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. We can end up with so many Krakens on the battlefield, and then we can use them to crack in. But Ominous Seas is a payoff card in our deck, but we can also cycle it for 2. So we can pay 2 while it's in our hand, discard it, and draw a card. If we really need card draw, we could do that with Ominous Seas. We're probably not going to, but it's there for us. Proft's Eidetic Memory is next. 1 and a blue for a legendary enchantment that says when it enters, we draw a card, and we have no maximum hand size. This is in the deck a couple of times. We don't really care about it, but it's a possibility. And it also says, at the beginning of combat on our turn, if we've drawn more than 1 card this turn, we put a number of 1/1 counters on one of our creatures equal to the number of extra cards we've drawn. So X counters, where X is the number of the cards we've drawn this turn minus 1, so it's just the number of extra cards, which, on the first turn, will be at least 1, since Proft's Eidetic Memory is 2 mana to just draw us a card, and maybe that's all it does, and that's a lot. Waterbender Ascension, we've already seen. It lets us draw cards once it has enough quest counters on it when our creatures deal combat damage to a player. Airbending Lesson draws us a card as part of its resolution. Garruk's Uprising. This is 2 and a green for an enchantment that does 3 things. One is, it gives all of our creatures trample. That's pretty good. Also, when it comes in, if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. Our commander is power 4. On the front side, at least. On the back, he's power 6. And whenever we have a creature we control with power 4 or greater enter, we also draw a card. So Garruk's Uprising wants us to have creatures that are ferocious, that have power 4 or greater. So if we have one, when it comes in, we draw a card. And once it's in, whenever we get one of those creatures, we draw a card. It's just repeatable card draw for us. Katara Bending Prodigy lets us waterbend 6 to draw a card. Midnight Clock lets us wheel, which is us drawing 7 cards once it strikes midnight. And then we have all of our wheels in here too. Molten Psyche draws us cards, Spirit Water Revival draws us 2 cards, or we can waterbend it to wheel with it. Windfall lets us wheel, Decaying Time Loop lets us wheel, Waterbending Lesson lets us draw 3 and then discard 1 if we don't waterbend 2. Whispering Madness is a wheel, so is Step Between Worlds. Legend of Yangchen lets us draw 3 and have an opponent draw 3 as well. I'm just trying to go through the ones we've already seen, which is all of these, I think. Time Reversal is a wheel, so is Echo Eons and Game Plan. Giant Koi can draw as an island by island cycling. Whirlwind Technique lets us draw 2 cards and then discard a card, or it's his target player. It could be someone else, I suppose. Emergency Powers and Memory are both wheels, but the one card we skipped is Case of the Locked Hothouse. This is a case enchantment for 3 and a green, which means it has this ability, and then if we solve it, it gets this ability as well. So its just inherent ability is we can play an additional land on each of our turns. This is another one of our cards that's about getting the lands that we wheel into out of our hand. So we don't have to keep just discarding them or drawing them again, something like that. Solving a case means we go to our end step, and at the beginning of our end step, if we control 7 or more lands, Case of the Locked Hothouse becomes solved, and it will remain solved for as long as it's on the battlefield. So when it's solved, it gives us the ability to look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can play lands and cast creature and enchantment spells from the top of our library. So this gives us access to more cards, which is why it's card advantage for us. And we can also continually play those extra lands on each of our turns. Playing lands and casting creature and enchantment spells, we're running 12 enchantments and 17 creatures, plus 38 lands. So pretty good for us to get advantages in that way, even if it's just getting extra lands into play. So that covers our draw section, our card advantage section. Let's go into acceleration, which I've just shorthand tagged as ramped. We're starting with Soul Ring. Gotta run Soul Ring. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. Yeah, you cost 1, pays 2, that's great. And most of the time, when we're casting spells that we have to pay a little extra mana for from our commander, a lot of that time we're able to, like if we're casting Game Plan for 5 generic and 1 blue, with Avatar Aang, that only costs us a single generic mana. So Soul Ring pays for that and then some. Pretty good. Of course, we're also running Arcane Signet, 2 generic mana for an artifact that adds 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity when we tap it. Our commander is a 5-color commander, so this taps for any color we need. It's great. Imrakul's Messenger is next. 1 and a blue for a 2/1 Eldrazi Fairy Rogue with Devoid. Devoid is probably not going to come up in your games, but if it does, here's the way this works. Devoid says this card has no color. That ability functions in all zones. If someone tries to counter this spell, because they have a spell that says counter target blue spell, it cannot counter Imrakul's Messenger. Imrakul's Messenger is not blue, it is devoid, it has no color. If somebody, however, tries to do something against a spell that has 1 or more colors, then this doesn't work, because this has no colors. Yeah, again, devoid doesn't come up that often, but worth recognizing how it works if you're a new player. Anyway, this is a 2/1 flyer that says whenever we draw our second card each turn, we make a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature and add a colorless mana. So that does not require us to tap it, so we can do that right away when that spawn comes in. We can only do this once each turn, or we can only make one of these once each turn because we only ever draw our second card once each turn. If we draw our 4th card, that's our 4th card. It's not like every other card. But this is a good way for us to get little tokens that we can also use to ramp. Pretty nice. Next up is Farseek. Farseek is great. This is one of our rampant growths for the deck. 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. It does not have to be a basic land, it just has to have this land type, or this one, or this one, or this one. So this can find anything that we need. Most of the time in this deck, it's finding an island of some sort. But we want to try and find a dual land if we can, and usually we're going to be looking for, in this deck, a bicycle land, because they are lands that are dual typed. They have basic types, they tap for multiple colors, and they come in tapped on their own, so we're not losing anything because Farseek puts it into play tapped. But of course we can find anything we want, including a basic if we need to. To contrast that, we'll get to the Felwar, is Nature's Lore. 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us find a forest, put it on the battlefield, and then shuffle. So Farseek finds us every type but a forest. Nature's Lore finds us a forest. So why is Farseek a 50-cent card and Nature's Lore a $2.50 card? It's because Nature's Lore does not put that card into play tapped. So we can find a basic forest, put it into play tapped, and tap it right away for mana. Or we could find a dual-typed forest, and if itself does not come in tapped, because maybe it's a Tango land, then we don't have to put it into play tapped. So Nature's Lore is powerful for us because it could be giving us a refund on whatever forest we find. Pretty good. Or from whatever forest we find, I suppose. Fellwar Stone is next. It's a 2-mana rock. It's an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So if our opponents are making white and blue and black mana, it can tap for 1 of any of those colors. If our opponents are making every color of mana, then this taps for every color. It comes in untapped, taps for mana for us, it only costs 2, and it's great. And if anyone has a land that taps for every color, so does Fellwar Stone. Pretty good. Next is Bender's Waterskin. I know you're looking at this and saying, this is a Manalith. It's a 3-mana artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color. Why aren't you running Chromatic Lantern? Well, Chromatic Lantern does fix our mana, but Chromatic Lantern fixes our mana in a way that comes up so infrequently when we have a well-constructed mana base, and we do. So the idea of making it so you don't have to worry about what lands you're tapping, you still have to if you're worried about losing your Chromatic Lantern, which a lot of times players will target if you're running a 5-color deck, because it can slow you down. So I would rather have a Manalith that does something extra for me rather than just fixing my mana in every way. If I wanted to do that, I would be running something more powerful like a Dryad of the Elysian Grove, which is a creature for also 3 mana that does make all my lands tap for anything, but it also gives me the ability to make extra land drops. Just saying. Bender's Waterskin is what I would rather go with. It's currently my favorite Manalith, because it taps for 1 mana of any color, but we also untap it during everyone's untap step. So if we need extra mana on someone else's turn, we're going to have at least 1 mana on everyone's turn. That's a way for us to tap out entirely and still have the mana to Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares one of our opponent's creatures on their own turns. Next up, we've seen Earthbender Ascension. It comes in and Rampant Growths us, puts a basic from our library onto the battlefield tapped. Midnight Clock is a 3-mana rock that taps for blue, and Case of the Locked Hothouse lets us play extra lands on each of our turns, which works pretty great in this deck. So that covers our acceleration section. Let's talk about interaction, which again, I've just shorthanded as removal. So I just mentioned Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. Other than one difference, these are the same card. They both cost a single white, they're both instants, and they both exile a target creature, and they both give that creature's controller a little kickback. Swords to Plowshares gives that creature's controller life equal to the exiled creature's power, and Path to Exile lets that creature's controller Rampant Growth. They search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Both of these are excellent removal spells. They're only 1 white, they're instant speed, you want to run them. Airbender Ascension is removal because it can airbend a creature. It doesn't have to be ours. Airbender's Reversal can only airbend one of our creatures, but it can destroy a target attacking creature. Aang can airbend a target creature or a spell, so that helps protect us and remove something, albeit temporarily. The same is true for Airbender Lesson, for any non-land permanent. Invasion Submersible lets us bounce a non-land permanent. Earth Rumble is a fight spell, so we can kill off a creature with it. Sandbender Storm lets us destroy a creature with power 4 or greater. Yangchen, the Legend of Yangchen, lets us exile at least 1 permanent, mana value 3 or greater, and hopefully more than that, but also she can airbend things. And of course, Commit lets us put a spell or non-land permanent second from the top of its owner's library. So that covers our interaction section. We are running, if I could spell properly, Avatar's Wrath as our 1 Wrath. This is the deck with the Avatar at the height of his power, and he needs a Wrath, so we're running Avatar's Wrath. Again, this price will come down, or just find it from somewhere that's not asking $20 for it. I don't know what this seller on Manapool is thinking, but yeah. Excellent card, but it's not $20 excellent. So that covers our support section. Let's talk about all of our supplemental sections, starting with our payoffs. These cards are really important in the deck. They are the way we sort of win the game. Wizard class, once we've leveled it up to level 3, we're getting to put counters on all of our creatures every time we draw a card, and we're wheeling constantly and drawing cards constantly from doing all this bending. So we can just pump up our creatures, especially our commander, quite large and swing in with them. Emrakul's Messenger gives us a payoff for drawing our second card each turn, which basically every turn we're going to do. Ominous Seas gives us a foreshadow counter every time we draw any card. So rather than getting counters on our creatures, every time we do that 8 times, we're able to crack this for a Kraken. It's especially nice because this doesn't require us to do it at sorcery speed, and it doesn't happen automatically. So if our opponents have forgotten about it, we can let them attack us, and then suddenly remove 8 counters from this, and remove 8 counters from this, and make a couple of Krakens and block with those Krakens, then swing in it from them. Proph's Eidetic Memory, of course, gives us the ability to put counters on one of our creatures at the start of combat based on the number of cards we've drawn beyond the first. Chasm Skulker is 2 and a blue for a 1/1 Squid Horror. This is whenever we draw a card, we put a counter on it. So that gets a little bit bigger. But there are plenty of cards that do that. Cleakant Sky Mage is 1 more, and it's in Foundations, and it flies. Why not that? Well, because when the Chasm Skulker dies, we make a number of squids, 1/1 squids, with Island Walk equal to the number of counters that were on it. Island Walk means if the defending player controls an island, the squids can't be blocked. So this makes us a bunch of tokens, which we could then pump up with the backside of Aang Swift Savior, Aang and Law. We could pump it up with Katara, the Katara that lets us waterbend and change the base power and toughness of all of our creatures. This gives us a lot of tokens whenever the Chasm Skulker dies. And remember, once it dies, it's not gone forever. We just have to find a wheel and shuffle it back into our library. Molten Psyche is one of our wheels, but if we have Metalcraft, which we have we have 9 artifacts in our library. It's not impossible, especially with all the card draw we're doing. Then, when we cast it, if we control 3 or more artifacts, it will deal damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that they've drawn this turn. That's a payoff not for us drawing cards, but for them drawing cards, which is oftentimes the same thing. Finally, we have Knowledge's Power. 3, a white and a blue, so castable for free with our commander, for an enchantment that says creatures we control get +X/+X, where X is the number of cards you've drawn this turn. So this is in a little bit of an awkward position, because we want our creatures to have this power and toughness bonus prior to combat. But if our commander isn't going to flip until Firebending happens, Firebending only happens during combat, because that's when it triggers, then we're going to be able to get this out post-combat, and we either have to choose to cast all of our wheels then, or wait until the next turn and hope that we untap with our commander. But the ability to just get maybe +3/+3 from this, considering we're drawing 1 card at least, so this is always giving our creatures +1/+1 on our turn, and then maybe we Waterbend and then Earthbend. So we've drawn cards off of our commander for that, and now everything's got +3/+3, which is a pretty good effect. It's giant growth for everything. And this just sticks around, waiting for us to draw more cards. So pretty nice. That covers our payoff section. Let's talk about the ways that we're pumping everything up. We've seen several of these already, but we haven't seen Dragonfire Blade. For a single mana, generic mana, we get an equipment that equips for 4, but it costs 1 less to equip for each color of the creature it targets. Meaning, this is free to equip to our commander, because he's 4 colors, so it costs 0. And it gives the equipped creature +2/+2 and hexproof from monocolor, meaning he can't be targeted by any spells or abilities our opponents control if the source of those spells or abilities, the source of those abilities, or if those spells are themselves 1 color. So Swords to Plowshares is only white, but if Doomblade is only black, that sort of thing. Mortify is black and white, so it wouldn't protect him from Mortify, but it's something, and it's so cheap. 1 mana to play, 0 to equip to Aang, and remember, this is an artifact, so it gives us the ability to do more damage to it gives us closer to Metalcraft for that 1 wheel, and also we can tap it without losing any of its efficacy for Waterbending every turn. Next, we've seen Wizard class. When it's level 3, we get counters on one of our creatures every time we draw a card. Proph's Eidetic Memory also puts counters on our creatures at the start of combat, based on the number of cards we've drawn beyond the first. Aang, on his backside, Aang and Law Ocean's Fury, puts a 1/1 counter on all of our tapped creatures whenever it attacks. Earthbender Ascension, once it has enough quest counters, puts a counter on one of our creatures every time we have landfall and gives them trample until end of turn. Glider Staff gives +1/+1 and flying to whatever we've equipped it with. Next we have Sokka, Tenacious Tactician. If you like this card, tune in next week, because I think it's the one I'm building next week. This is 1 and Jeskai mana, a blue, a red, and a white, for a 3/3 legendary human warrior ally. We've seen this a bunch of times. With Menace and Prowess. Prowess means whenever we cast a non-creature spell, Sokka gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Awesome Sokka card. Sokka gives all of our other allies Menace and Prowess, which means Aang, while he's on his front side, I think his backside isn't an ally? Is that true? No, his backside is still an ally. So Sokka helps us out both ways. Pretty good. In addition, Sokka's not done. Sokka also says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we make a 1/1 white ally creature token, the same kind of token that his sister makes, the one that can waterbend and change everything's base power and toughness. So remember, those tokens have Menace and Prowess. We have Prowess in this deck because we're only running 17 creatures total, including Sokka and our commander. So every other spell we cast is giving each of our creatures, each of our allies at least, +1/+1. And they all have Menace and Prowess. So Aang in the air with Menace, Prowess, and flying, that's just very good. Solid Ground, of course, doesn't actually pump up anything, but does make it so anything that is getting counters on it gets 1 extra counter. So Solid Ground isn't really helping Dragonfire Blade or Glider Staff or Sokka, but it is helping Wizard Class, Prosthetic Memory, Angswift Savior, Earthbender Ascension, and we have 2 creatures that can pump themselves up with counters, and 1 creature that pumps themselves up without counters. So yeah. Anyway, there's Katara, Water Tribe's Hope. Can pump everything up if we waterbend to that amount. It changes their power and toughness to that amount until end of turn. And of course, Knowledge's power we've already seen, giving +X/+X to all of our creatures where X is the number of cards we've drawn that turn. That's our pump section. Let's talk about protecting our creatures and ourselves. We start with Dragonfire Blade. Of course, gives the equipped creature, probably Aang, hexproof and monocolored. We've got to run the Swifties. Swiftfoot Boots are 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste. Haste might be helpful to us if we're willing to spend 1 to get into that and just start firebending right away. But hexproof is terrific, just straight up hexproof, not just from monocolored. So that's a good way to protect our commander. Angswift Savior can protect us because this is a counter spell, essentially. That's pretty good. And Avatar's Wrath protects us from having our opponents bring their stuff back because they're not able to cast them from anywhere other than their hands until our next turn. Pretty good. Next we have our Evasion section. These are ways to get past our creatures, or our opponent's creatures. Waterbender Ascension, we can waterbend 4 to make one of our creatures unblockable. Earthbender Ascension, whenever it triggers and puts a counter on one of our creatures, that creature also gains trample. Garruk's Uprising gives all of our creatures trample. Glider Staff gives the equipped creature flying. Sokka gives all of our allies menace. And Appa, when Appa enters or attacks, instead of airbending something that we control, we could choose to give one of our creatures flying until end of turn. That's pretty good. So that's our Evasion section. Here is the section that makes us some tokens to supplement the fact that we only have 17 creatures. So Emrakul's Messenger makes us one of those Eldrazi spawn. Every time we draw our second card each turn, usually we're using them for ramp and just for blocking, but that's fine. Firebender Ascension does come in and make us a red soldier with Firebending 1. Ominous Seas can make us these 8/8 Krakens. Chasm Skulker, when it dies, leaves behind a bunch of 1/1 blue squids with Island Walk. Katara comes in and makes 1 ally. Sokka makes us that same kind of ally every time we cast a non-creature spell. Good job, Sibs. So that covers our tokens section. Let's look at our section on Recursion. These are cards that let us replay either themselves or other cards from our graveyard. Decaying Time Loop, we can retrace it, so we can play this over and over by just discarding a land card when we do. Toph, Hard-Headed Teacher, lets us discard a card when she enters and return an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand if we do that. And we're even rewarded if that instant or sorcery we return was a lesson. The last section we have of our spells is our synergy section. This has 2 cards we've seen and 1 we haven't. Earth an ally, gets +1/+0 for each ally we control, or each color among allies we control. That's pretty good. We've got 13 allies. They're often going to be giving him some good bonuses, but generally it's coming from our commander and just making him a 4/2. Earth Kingdom General, also, we're putting a lot of counters on things, and he's giving us life in a reward for that. But our last card is Moon Mist. This is from the original Innistrad set, and it just hasn't been reprinted, except on Arena once. Oh, I guess it was in the list. But the original is cheaper. So Moon Mist is 1 and a green for an instant. Transform all humans. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures other than werewolves and wolves. So we can use this to transform Aang. Aang's front side, our commander's front side, is a human. The same is true of Aang Swift Savior, which means we don't have to go through all the hoops of bending each type of bending form if we want to just get him on the back side. We can do this at instant speed on an opponent's turn, so we can cast spells discounted by Aang's backside then, and then pass to the next turn, which could be ours or could be another opponent's, and flip Aang back over and let him explode with value, drawing us cards, gaining us life, putting counters on himself, etc. Moon Mist is very powerful and surprisingly good in this deck, especially with its utility, and is especially nice if we can make it happen and then do some of our wheels for free or for a big discount using the backside of Aang, and then get Moon Mist out of our graveyard, back into our library, maybe even back into our hand. It's just very strong. I imagine Moon Mist is only going to get more expensive. It's probably going to be reprinted at some point. I don't know when they're going to reprint it. I don't know if we're going back to Innistrad anytime soon. It's certainly not in the next year, unless they can find a way to put it in Reality Fracture. But maybe they will print this in 2027 as part of the X-Men set because of Wolfsbane as part of X Factor. I'm just speculating now. But Moon Mist is only going to get more expensive because there's all these transforming double-faced cards. So Moon Mist and many of the transforming double-faced cards from these Universes Beyond sets, particularly the Marvel sets, and most of those creatures are human on the front. So Moon Mist just gives us a very cheap way, in that it's only a couple of dollars, and cheap in that it's only 2 mana, to immediately flip those cards without having to go through the hoops that we've seen from the Spider-Man set you have to go through to flip them. So if you want a copy of Moon Mist, or a few copies, probably better to buy it sooner than later, but that's just my guess. In any case, it's very powerful in this deck, and worth running. So that covers all of our spells. As we usually do, we're going to go over our land base. We're a 5-color deck, and so we have all 5 basics. Of course, they're the Avatar printings. We're mostly blue, which is why we've got 8 islands and only 2 mountains and swamps, and 3 forests and 4 plains. This ends up working out pretty well. I don't think we even really need to be running either of these 2 swamps, but I didn't feel good not being able to tutor for a basic of every color we need just in case. So we've got 19 basics in this spread, and it tends to be a pretty good balance for us based on what we're doing with the rest of our deck. We're running 4 bicycle lands. Bicycle lands are like this. Fetid Pools is a dual-typed land that comes in tapped, meaning this is an island and a swamp. So we could Farseek for this. If we wanted to find a swamp, we could find Fetid Pools. So if we want to find an island, we could find Fetid Pools. It, of course, taps for a black and a blue, or black or a blue, rather, because it's an island and a swamp. But if we want, we don't have to play it as a land. While it's in our hand, we can cycle it for 2. Just pay 2, discard it, and draw a card. And because we're discarding it, we might be able to get it back when we do one of our wheels. So Fetid Pools is an island and a swamp, taps for black and blue. Irrigated Farmland is the same for white and blue. Scattered Groves is a forest and a plains, so it's green and white. And Sheltered Thicket is a mountain forest, so it does the same for red and green. But other than the names and the land types, and of course therefore the mana they tap for, these all work the same. We're running 6 fixing lands. Of course we're running Command Tower. Command Tower is an untapped land that taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, just like an Arcane Signet does. So this is an untapped 5-color land that doesn't cost us anything to play or tap. So yeah, of course we're running it. We're also running Exotic Orchard. Exotic Orchard is, if Command Tower is Arcane Signet, our Exotic Orchard is Felwar Stone as a land. It's an untapped land that makes 1 mana of any color a land an opponent controls could produce. So untapped land that's going to produce at least one of our colors. I mean, if we're up against 3 mono red decks, then okay, it's an untapped red source, sure. But pretty good for this 5-color deck. The Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop is an untapped land that taps for colorless mana, but we can also tap it for 1 mana of any color, but only to cast an ally spell or activate an ability of an ally's source. So we have 13 allies in the deck, but most notably, our commander is an ally. So this taps for any color we need of our commander, and it means it fixes our mana for getting our commander out quickly. We can also use this to activate a Waterbending ability on Katara or on Aang Swift Savior. So pretty nice if we need to do that. I guess Aang Swift Savior, his Waterbending ability is not colored, but Katara is, so there we go. Also, if we've got extra mana lying around, we can pay 5 and tap it to make an ally token. That's alright. We're running Crozen Verge. Crozen Verge is a land that comes in tapped. It taps for colorless, but we can also pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice it to find a forest and a plains, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So that's very slow, in that it comes in tapped, we have to pay and sacrifice it, and the lands we get are tapped. However, this is 1 land drop that we get it onto the battlefield with that eventually becomes 2 lands in play, so it is ramp in our land base, albeit slowly. What's especially nice, though, is this can find forests and plains. So we could find a Cinderglade with this forest, which is a tap land anyway, that's a forest and a mountain. And then we find an irrigated farmland here, which is a plains and island. So now we've gotten 2 lands, and we've got all 4 of our colors between them. So Crozen Verge is very good in this deck, even though it is a little slow. Path of Ancestry is like Command Tower, but as a tap land. It has the exact same text that Command Tower does when you tap it. However, when we use that mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we also get a scry off of it. So obviously, our commander shares creature types with himself. So if we use this to cast our commander, we get a scry. If we use this to cast any of our other humans, or allies, or even our avatars, we get a scry. It won't give us a scry, though, if we cast the Tale of Yangchen, or the Legend of Yangchen, because Yangchen is only an avatar on the back side of that card. The front side is an Enchantment Saga, which is not a creature spell, so it doesn't give us the scry. But it still works for everything of the other types that I mentioned. And in any case, it's a 5-color tap land. That's pretty good. Finally, we have Temple of the False God. I know not everyone likes this card, especially in a deck that has so many colors like ours does, but it's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, so it's a soul land like Sol Ring, but only if we control 4 or more other lands, so 5 total lands including itself. Temple of the False God gives us colorless mana, which oftentimes we're able to use in conjunction with the backside of our commander's discount ability to just cast other spells, like with Sol Ring. So it's not great for us if it's in our hand early on, like if our opening hand is Temple of the False God and a swamp and no other lands, we probably don't want to keep that. But it doesn't take too long for us to ramp other lands into play, and if Temple of the False God is one of the lands we have, as long as we've got 4 other lands, we're ahead of the game. It's ramp on a land, just not early on. So that covers our fixing lands. We're running 4 Tango lands. These are the same color combinations as our Bicycle lands, but they work a little differently. They are dual typed, just like the Bicycle lands, so Canopy Vista is a forest and a plains, so we can find it with Farseek or Nature's Lore if we want. And it enters tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So 19 of our lands are basic. It doesn't say lands with basic types, it has to actually be like a basic mountain, a basic plains. But that means if we Nature's Lore for Canopy Vista, which says search your library for a forest, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle, and we have 2 basics in play already, Nature's Lore has gotten us Canopy Vista untapped, which means it's found us an untapped white source if we needed it. So that's very powerful. Works for Cinderglade as well, Doesn't help for either of these because neither of these have are forest types, but still pretty good to be able to have these and play them untapped. Probably a likelihood that we can do. If you wanted to side grade these, you could just use the check lands, like, Dragon Skull Summit's not a good example, but like Rootbound Crag is the same color as the Cinderglade. It's not typed like it, but it's more likely to come in untapped in this deck. Just like if you wanted to upgrade the Bicycle lands, you could upgrade to a Shock land, and the same is true for these Tangle lands. Shock lands would be great for those because they can come in untapped as long as we're willing to pay the 2 life for them. So pretty good. We're running Seaside Citadel as our only tri-land because our deck is mostly blue, and after that it's white and green. We've got very little red and almost no black in our deck. So as a tri-land, this comes in tapped, but it makes one of any of those 3 colors, black, blue, or white. So we could upgrade this if we wanted to Spara's Headquarters is the name of the Triome. So it would have the basic types as well. It would be a forest, a plains, and an island. And it also can be cycled for 3 generic mana. But I'm talking about these upgrades because those are more expensive. We could also, I guess I should mention, with the Bicycle lands, we could side grade into Pain lands, which are definitely coming in untapped and can make us 2 colors of mana. They just don't have the basic types. So if we want to make sure we can go a little faster, we can't fetch for them, but if we're running the Tango lands in addition, then Pain lands would be an okay way to shore up our mana in place of these Bicycle lands. Just a side grade, though. Finally, we have 4 utility lands. Ba Sing Se is a land that comes in tapped unless we control a basic, so similar to the Tango lands, but it only requires 1 basic in play, and it taps for green. We can also pay 2 and a green and tap it to Earthbend 2, but only as a sorcery. So Ba Sing Se is 1 more source of Earthbending for us if we need that, and it's a repeatable one. I mentioned earlier that compared to like our Waterbending and some of our Airbending, a lot of our Earthbending is one and done rather than repeatable. We have Ba Sing Se to make up for that. Next, we're running Demolition Field because you need to have at least 1 source of land destruction in your deck, but I like to limit it to just like 1 or 2 because I know a lot of pods, especially for the power level of the decks that I build, sort of frown on land destruction. And I'm not talking about mass land denial, just being able to deal with someone's land. So Demolition Field is a great way to do it. It comes in untapped and it taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. And then that player gets to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And so do we. So neither they nor us are down a land. We've been able to find whatever basic we need, assuming we have basics left in our library. And whatever like problematic land that they had, like a Rogue's Passage in their Voltron deck, or a Glacial Chasm, if they're, the one friend of mine that runs Glacial Chasm, that's stopping us from winning or helping themselves win too quickly, we've been able to deal with that problem, and we still have land that we can use for mana, and so do they. Fire Nation Palace is our one other way to Firebend. It's a land that, like Ba Sing Se, comes in tapped rather, unless we control a basic. It does tap for red, or we can pay 1 and a red and tap it, and one of our creatures gains Firebending 4 until end of turn. So we can put this on our commander, and now he has Firebending 4 and Firebending 2, meaning when he attacks, he will trigger both of those, draw us a card off of both of them, and we'll end up with a total of 6 mana in our pool, which seems pretty good. We can activate Waterbending costs with that as long as they're not only a sorcery speed. We can do whatever we need with that. Sounds good. Finally, we are running Rogue's Passage because a lot of the ways we win are with building up our flying commander and swinging in with him. So Rogue's Passage is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable. It's worth noting that this can be used politically. We can make our opponent's creatures unblockable if we want. So what we would want to do in that case is say, hey, if you attack opponent B, if you attack opponent A, I will make it so your big creature is unblockable. Just don't come at me for a turn cycle. And they'll say, okay, go ahead and use a Rogue's Passage. And you say, no, you have to attack first, because I don't want to use my Rogue's Passage and then have you attack me with an unblockable creature. And they'll say, okay, that's fair. So yeah, Rogue's Passage, very nice. It's also worth noting, 4 mana is exactly the amount of mana that Fire Nation Palace makes someone make. So if we're tapping 1, a red, and this land to activate it, that's 3 lands, versus the 4 we would have to tap plus the Rogue's Passage to activate this. So we're able to get this to happen like, we use Fire Nation Palace, we're tapping 3 lands, we attack with our creature, it makes 4 mana, and then before blocks, we use that 4 mana to activate Rogue's Passage. So we've ended up activating Rogue's Passage by tapping a total of 4 lands, rather than 4 and the Rogue's Passage. It's 4 including the Rogue's Passage to make something unblockable. Or we could just use the mana from our commander to contribute to that. It's not quite the same, but yeah, anyway, just a little trick there if you want to use that. And that sums it all up. Again, I'm releasing new Avatar Commander decks every Thursday through mid-January when the Lorwyn Eclipsed set drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or style of deck. Thanks for watching, everyone. And of course, thanks again to our friend, so sorry, at Dr. Superlative for requesting this deck. My apologies. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when I post new decks, which is pretty often. And remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.